Hi, I'm Chad with Move for a Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for a Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can build mode pentatonic scales. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is 5.27 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So we've been talking about the pentatonic scales in these last lessons, and we were talking about the major pentatonic scale and the minor pentatonic scale, which are by far the most common pentatonic scales. And using the minor and major pentatonic scales over major or minor chords works really well, sounds really good, but if you're just using with the same root note, you don't get mode sounds because you could use them over any of the major chords from the major scale, or you could use them over any of the minor chords from the major scale. So it's not going to create any of the mode sounds, have any of the color tones from the modes. Then I also showed you how you can superimpose with different roots and get some of the mode sounds doing that. But still, you couldn't get all of the mode sounds doing that. This lesson, I'm going to show you how you can build mode pentatonic scales, because like I said, a pentatonic scale is just a scale built with 5 notes. The major and minor are the most common by far, but you can build any scale with 5 notes and you'll have a new pentatonic scale. And pentatonic scales are nice because there's less patterns to learn. You only have to learn 5 patterns. And if you do 2 notes per string, which the major and minor pentatonic patterns are, it's really easy to memorize the shapes, and they're usually pretty easy to play. So you can create pentatonic scales that really bring out the color of the modes, and that's what I'm going to explain in this lesson. So first we'll just start with the major pentatonic scale, which you know is root 2, 3, 5, 6. And again, that doesn't create any of the sounds of the modes because any of the major modes have those intervals, so it doesn't have any of the color tones from any of the modes. So if you wanted to create more of an Ionian sound, you could throw in the 4 and the 7 because those 2 intervals together really create the Ionian sound. But I don't really like throwing in the 4 because that's an avoid note. So what you could do is just change the 6, the major 6, to a major 7. And so then it'd be just like the major pentatonic scale, except the 6 is now moved up to the 7. And now you have more of an Ionian pentatonic scale. If you wanted, you could change the 3 to the 4 or the 5 to the 4 and really bring out the sound of Ionian, but like I said, I don't really like throwing in the avoid note of Ionian in a pentatonic scale, but it can be done. So what you're doing is just to go from this major pentatonic scale to create more of an Ionian sound, move the 6 up a whole step. No matter where this lies on the fretboard, you're going to end up with an Ionian pentatonic scale. And it's best if you can leave 2 notes per string, and that's going to be the easiest way to memorize these. And this would just be pattern 1. I'm just showing all of these in pattern 1, and in the e-guide I'll show them in all the patterns. And this scale isn't very common, this Ionian pentatonic right here. You're not going to run across that very often, but it is an option that you could use to really bring out that sound and still end up with a pentatonic scale. The next mode is Dorian, and the Dorian pentatonic is a more common scale. You'll run across this more often. A lot more people use it. And actually the easiest way to get to it, even though Dorian's a minor mode, is to start from the major pentatonic scale, because you're only going to move 1 note from the major pentatonic scale, and that's the 3. So if you move the 3 down half a step, you'd end up with root 2, flat 3, 5, 6, and then you'd have a Dorian sound, because then you have the minor triad with the root, flat 3, 5, and then the major 6, which is Dorian. Only Dorian has that major 6 with the minor triad. So doing this would give you Dorian pentatonic. You could use this over 2 chords from the major scales, so any Dorian chord, and really bring out the sound of Dorian. So this isn't superimposing like we did before. So if you're playing over a C minor chord or a C minor 7 chord, you would use the C Dorian pentatonic, so with the same root note. And that's what I have drawn on the screen as C. All the roots are C, but it doesn't matter. I just put them on C to put them more in the middle of the screen. This works for any key. And again, I'm just showing in pattern 1 here, and all the other patterns will be in the e-guide. Another common way to bring out the Dorian sound is with what's called a minor 6 pentatonic. That's a more common pentatonic as well that's used by some more advanced players. And the minor 6 obviously is a Dorian sound because it has that major 6 in it. So the way you can get to that is to take a minor pentatonic scale this time and just take the flat 7s of the minor pentatonic scale and move those down to major 6s. Then you'd end up with what's called a minor 6 pentatonic scale. And this has a really unique sound. It's a really cool scale, and it really brings out the sound of Dorian because of that major 6. You have that minor triad with the major 6. And again, if you're playing over a C minor 6 chord or a C major 7 or a C minor 7 chord or a C minor chord, you would use C minor 6 pentatonic. Your next mode is Phrygian. So to bring out the sound of the Phrygian mode with the pentatonic scale, you could take the minor pentatonic scale, take out the 4, add in the flat 2, and move your flat 7 down to a flat 6. And that would give you a Phrygian pentatonic sound, because then you're bringing out the flat 2 and the flat 6 with the minor triad, which is really sound of Phrygian. Or if you're looking at Phrygian to get there from the major pentatonic scale, you would lower the 2, lower the 3, lower the 6. That would give you the Phrygian pentatonic scale. Your next mode is Lydian. So to create a Lydian mode pentatonic, you could start from the major pentatonic and take your 5s, move them down half a step to the sharp 4, and then you'd end up with root 2, 3, sharp 4, 6, and that would be the Lydian sound, because then you have sharp 4 in a major pentatonic because it has that major 3rd. So that would be a way you could create a Lydian pentatonic scale and use that over any of the Lydian chords. Your next mode is Mixolydian. So a way you can make a Mixolydian mode pentatonic is to start with the major pentatonic, take your 6, move it up half a step to the flat 7, and then you'd have a Mixolydian pentatonic, which is root 2, 3, 5, flat 7. So you have that major triad with that flat 7, which Mixolydian is the only one that has that. So again, you just end up with a pentatonic scale, 5 notes, but you've created the Mixolydian sound. Or another common Mixolydian type sound is called the dominant pentatonic scale. And you could get that from starting with the minor pentatonic scale. And the only difference between minor pentatonic and dominant pentatonic is you take your flat 3s and move them up half a step to the major 3rds, then you have a dominant pentatonic scale. And this is a common scale used as well, and it really brings out the sound of Mixolydian because it has the major triad with that flat 7. And this one's a little easier to remember how to play because you're just taking a minor pentatonic scale, moving up the flat 3 half a step, and that's the only note you have to really worry about. So the shape can be easier to memorize since the minor pentatonic is easier to memorize for most guitarists. Most guitarists use the minor pentatonic more. The next mode is Aeolian, and to create an Aeolian pentatonic, you could start from major pentatonic and lower your 3 and your 6 half a step. That could give you an Aeolian pentatonic. So a 5-note scale, bringing out the notes, bringing out the color tones of the Aeolian scale, which are the flat 6, along with that major 2nd with the minor triad chord. So those 5 notes really bring out the sound of Aeolian. Or your last mode is Locrian. To get a Locrian mode pentatonic scale, you can start from the minor pentatonic scale, and all you'd have to do is lower the 5 half a step to the flat 5, and those notes together would give you a Locrian pentatonic scale. So you'd end up with root, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 7. And it would really bring out the sound of the Locrian mode with a pentatonic scale. So those are just ways that you can create 5-note scales that really bring out the sounds of the mode. So instead of superimposing like we did in the other lesson, you have the same root note. So if you're playing over a chord that is C major 7, you would still use a scale that starts with C as your root note, not unlike what we did in the other lesson where we superimposed other root notes. So this is a way to have easier scales, pentatonic scales that are just 5 notes, but still really bring out the sounds of the modes. This is a really useful thing to be able to do and use. And these aren't your only options for creating sounds of the modes with pentatonic scales. Some of these are the most common, others aren't used that often, so I just came up with what I thought worked well. But you can come up with your own, just 5-note scales, but really bring in the color tones of each of the modes, and then you'll have a mode pentatonic scale that can be used over any of those mode chords. So those are mode pentatonic scales. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about arpeggios. And be sure to download the e-guide, all the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we have at least one new lesson every day.